Hey guys, tonight we are leaving behind the crowded, noisy, and frankly smelly medieval world you think you know, and we're trading it for a job that offers the ultimate in social distancing. We're heading to the coast, to a lonely rock where the wind doesn't just blow, it screams, and the salt spray crusts on your skin like a second, rougher set of clothes. You are being conscripted into the Lighthouse service. Forget the romantic idea of a quiet retirement. This is a life of raw, elemental duty, a trade where your sanity is a currency, and your only company is the mournful cry of gulls and the endless, rhythmic sigh of the sea. You're about to become a vital cog in the machine of maritime trade, a guardian of ships and souls. And let's be brutally honest for a second. You probably won't survive the first winter if you can't make peace with the fact that a warm meal and a dry bed are now luxuries, not expectations. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment below telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always fun to picture the different corners of the world where we're all winding down together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The summons comes not with a royal seal on parchment, but with a heavy, callous hand on your shoulder in the tavern. You've been dodging this for years, but your luck, like the cheap ale in your tankard, has finally run out. The man is a grizzled veteran of the sea, his face a roadmap of scars and squint lines, and he smells of tar, salt, and profound, unshakable dampness. He doesn't ask, he informs. The beacon at Serpent's Tooth needs a pair of hands. Yours will do. There's no argument. This is it. You're leaving behind the grimy, bustling, flea-infested world of the medieval port town, a place where the threat of plague is as common as the stench of fish guts. For a life of enforced isolation, you are handed a leather satchel containing a lump of hard cheese, a harder loaf of bread, a small pouch of coarse salt, and a writ of service that feels unervingly light for the weight it carries. Your old life, with all its petty troubles and fleeting joys, ends at the water's edge. The boat that takes you, there is a small, sturdy fishing vessel that reeks of its catch, piloted by a man of few words and many superstitions. He barely looks at you, muttering prayers the saints you've never heard of as he navigates the choppy, gray waters. The mainland shrinks behind you, a smudge of green and brown against a vast, indifferent sky. The air changes, growing colder, sharper, filling your lungs with a briny tang that is both invigorating and foreboding. After what feels like an eternity of being tossed on the swells, it appears. Serpent's Tooth. It's not a gentle island. It's a jagged fist of black granite thrust up from the depths, as if the earth itself tried to punch a hole in the sky. And perched on its highest point, looking less built and more grown from the rock itself, is the Lighthouse. It's a stark, cylindrical tower of dark stone, its surface pitted and scarred by 1,000 storms. It doesn't look welcoming. It looks enduring. It looks like a challenge. The boat doesn't dare get too close. You're ferried the last 100 yards in a tiny, leaking coracle that you row yourself, your knuckles white on the oars as the surf crashes against the rocks on either side. You scramble onto a slippery stone jetty, your sea legs buckling beneath you, and by the time you found your footing, the fishing boat is already a distant speck, heading back to the world you've just left. The silence is the first thing that truly hits you. It's not a peaceful silence. It's a roaring, empty silence, filled only by the wind whipping around the tower and the relentless, percussive crash of waves against the base of the island. You stand there alone, the satchel feeling pathetically small, and the reality of your new existence sinks with the cold that is already seeping through your boots. This is your home now. This rock, this tower, this wind, this is all there is. The door to the tower is low, arched, and made of oak, so thick it looks like it could stop a battering ram. It groans open on iron hinges, revealing not a home, but a cavern. The ground floor is a storage space, smelling of damp stone, old smoke, and something else, something earthy and slightly sour. Sacks of grain are stacked against one wall, next to barrels you hope contain fresh water. A few crudely made tools lean in a corner, a sledgehammer, a pickaxe, a wooden shovel. A steep, narrow staircase, little more than a spiral of steps carved into the inner wall, winds its way up into the gloom above. There is no furniture, no hearth, no comfort. This is a place of function, of pure, unadorned survival. You drop your satchel on a dusty, empty crate. This is it. The sum total of your worldly possessions, in a stone cylinder in the middle of a cold, gray sea. You are no longer a villager, a tradesman, or a runaway. You are the keeper of the light, and your first night is about to begin. Historians still argue whether these remote postings were a form of punishment for minor crimes or a genuine, respected vocation, a scholarly debate that feels entirely academic as you shiver on the stone floor. A mainstream historical fact you're about to live is that lighthouses like the famous one at Dover were often maintained by Roman-inspired designs and later by monastic orders who saw the duty as a spiritual act of charity. But a quirkier, fringe tidbit you'll soon discover is the previous keeper's bizarre belief, evidenced by the chicken bones and strange chalk symbols you find tucked into a crevice in the wall, that the lighthouse itself was a living entity that needed to be appeased with small offerings to keep its stone heart from growing angry and crumbling into the sea. You're not superstitious, but as the wind howls like a living thing around the tower, you can't help but think maybe he had a point. You don't sleep so much as you pass out from sheer, bone-deep exhaustion, curled on a ruffled blanket in the corner of that stone storage room. The wind a constant, droning lullaby that is anything but gentle. Dawn arrives not with a sunrise, but with a gradual, gray lightening of the gloom from a single, narrow window slit. Your body aches in places you didn't know could ache, a symphony of stiffness conducted by the cold, hard floor. That first morning is a ritual of discovery, a slow, painful exploration of your new domain. You trudge up that spiraling staircase, your hand trailing along the damp, cold stone of the central wall. The steps are worn smooth in the middle from generations of keepers before you, their passage etched into the very rock. It's a humbling thought, this unbroken chain of solitude. You're just the latest link. The staircase opens abruptly into the heart of your existence, the lamp room. And it takes your breath away, not with its beauty, but with its terrifying simplicity and scale. The room is circular, and much of the wall is open to the elements, shielded only by a series of stone arches that do little to stop the wind from whipping through. In the center sits the beacon itself. It's not a delicate lantern. It's a massive, iron-reinforced stone basin, a giant's fire pit blackened by years of soot and heat. Above it hangs an elaborate system of chains and pulleys, used to lower and raise a metal grate for fuel. The fuel, your eyes drift to the piles stacked against the far wall. It's not just wood. There are stacks of dried peat, tight bundles of straw, and, most importantly, a small mountain of dried, fish oil-soaked rushes. The air in here is thick with the ghosts of 1,000 fires, the scent of old smoke and rancid oil clinging to the stone. This is your altar, and keeping this fire alive is your only prayer. The sheer physics of the task ahead of you is staggering. This isn't just about lighting a candle at dusk. This is about maintaining a consistent, bright flame for the entire, crushing length of the night, a battle against the wind that wants to snuff it out and the rain that wants to drown it. The previous keeper left a crude, charcoal-scrawled checklist on one wall, a timeline of duties that looks less like a schedule and more like a sentence. It begins with dawn. Inspect and clear the air vents, which you discover are narrow channels designed to draw the smoke up and out, but are currently half-blocked by the nests of determined seabirds. You spend the morning on your knees, scooping out twigs, feathers, and other, less identifiable debris, the gulls shrieking their protest from just outside the arches. Every task is monumental. Hauling the fuel up the narrow stairs is a back-breaking exercise in logistics and sheer will. A single bundle of those oil-soaked rushes is heavier than it looks, and you quickly learn to hug the inner wall on the stairs, your mind conjuring vivid, unpleasant images of slipping and tumbling down that stone spiral, a human log for a fire that will never be lit. The mainstream historical fact you're living through is the sheer logistical effort behind these early warning systems. Structures like the Colossus of Rhodes, one of the Seven Wonders, was believed to have featured a massive beacon, a testament to how vital guided navigation was even in the ancient world. But your reality is far grimmer than any wonder. Your world has shrunk to the diameter of this tower, and your universe is defined by the stockpile of fuel below. A quirky fringe tidbit you uncover, as you sort through the woodpile, is a small, carefully carved wooden doll, its face worn smooth. It was likely a child's toy, brought here by some long-dead keeper, a tiny, heartbreaking piece of the world left behind. Used perhaps as a good luck charm against the despair of isolation. You find yourself not scoffing, but placing it back carefully in a dry niche, a silent pact with the ghosts of your predecessors. The afternoon is dedicated to what the checklist grimly calls lens maintenance. The lens is a generous term. It's a series of large, polished sheets of thin, hammered bronze set into a rotating wooden frame that surrounds a beacon. Their purpose is to catch and reflect the firelight, magnifying it and directing out to sea in a sweeping beam. In theory, in practice, they are clouded by a thick layer of salt crust and smoke residue. You spend hours with a bucket of precious fresh water and a sack of gritty sand, polishing each sheet until your arms burn and your reflection, a wild-eyed, soot-smudged creature, stares back at you from the gleaming metal. Historians still argue whether the complex mirror arrangements described in some texts were actually effective or were mostly theoretical, given the limitations of contemporary metalworking. As you wipe the grime from your face, you feel you've already sided with the skeptics. This is a battle of attrition, a war fought with grit and muscle against the relentless elements. The tower is no longer just a structure. It is a demanding, stone-bodied partner in a dance you're only just learning the steps to, and it has all the patience in the world, while you have only the fading light of the day. The fading light is your master, its command absolute. As the sun bleeds out over the western horizon, painting the choppy water in shades of bruised purple and dull orange, a deep, primal urgency kicks in. All the day's labor, the hauling, the cleaning, the polishing, was merely the prelude. This is the main event. You stand in the lamp room, the wind now a colder, sharper entity, and you prepare for the nightly trial by fire. The first step is a ritual of precision and paranoia. You arrange your tinder, dry moss and shavings of resinous pine, in the center of the great basin, then build a careful teepee of the smallest, driest kindling over it. This is the seed, and its germination is everything. One misplaced, damp piece of wood, one gust of wind at the wrong moment, and the entire night is thrown into jeopardy. Your hands, already rough and nicked, move with a focused, nervous energy. You check and recheck the positioning of the bronze reflectors, ensuring their polished faces are ready to catch the fledgling light. The world outside the arches is dissolving into a uniform, deep gray, the line between sea and sky vanishing. The silence feels heavier now, expectant. You strike the flint and steel. The sparks fizzle, die, and fizzle again, each failure tightening the coil of anxiety in your gut. Finally, a single spark catches on a tuft of moss, glowing like an angry red eye. You cradle it with your hands, blowing on it gently, your world shrinking to that tiny, fragile ember. It smokes, it hesitates, and then, with a soft whump, the kindling takes. The flame is born, a small, dancing thing of gold and orange. Now the real work begins. You don't just let it roar. You feed it carefully, methodically, like coaxing a temperamental beast. You add a few of the oil-soaked rushes, which catch with a sizzle and a pop, their fishy scent now transforming into sharp, familiar odor of the beacon smoke. The light grows, pushing back the encroaching darkness, and for a moment, there's a flicker of triumph. Then the wind, as if offended by your success, gusts through an arch, and the flame gutters violently, threatening to vanish. You instinctively throw your body between the fire and the wind, a human shield, feeling the heat on your back and the cold on your face. This is a dance. Constant, vigilant motion. The mainstream historical fact you are enacting, a truth known to every sailor from Alexandria to York, is that the primary fuel for these coastal beacons was often whatever burned brightest and longest locally, which in your case is that pungent combination of peat and fish oil rushes, a far cry from the exotic oils sometimes used in great Mediterranean ports. The fire now has a steady, hungry heart. You lower the heavy iron grate over it, the chains clanking ominously in the quiet, and begin the slow, rhythmic work of feeding it through the night. You add a log, then a bundle of rushes, then a brick of peat, creating a layered, slow-burning cake of fuel. The heat is immense, a physical wall that pushes you back, dry your eyes and cracking your lips. Sweat and soap mingle on your skin. This is where the loneliness takes on a new texture. It's no longer an empty silence. It's a silence filled with the crackle of your fire, the hiss of escaping sap, and the groan of the tower against the wind. You are the only conscious thing for miles, tending a star you built yourself. A quirky, fringe tidbit from the previous keeper's notes, which you now understand on a visceral level, was his insistence on talking to the fire. He had names for it, moods he ascribed to it. You thought it was madness. Now, after only a few nights, you find yourself doing it. You mutter encouragements when it burns bright and steady, curse it when it smokes too much, and plead with it when a gust threatens its life. Come on, you stubborn beast, you whisper, feeding it another rush. Burn for me. It's not insanity, it's a coping mechanism. The fire is your companion, your charge, your adversary, and your purpose, all rolled into one flickering, demanding entity. Historians still argue whether the mental toll of such isolation was recognized by the authorities who posted men here, or they were simply seen as disposable components in the machinery of trade. As you stare into the flames, your mind beginning to unravel the day's events into a meaningless jumble, you feel the debate is settled. They knew. They just didn't care. The night stretches on, measured not in hours, but in the diminishing height of your fuel pile and the slow, grinding ache in your legs from standing. Your world is a circle of light, the dancing shadows on the soot-blackened stone, and the vast, impenetrable blackness beyond. You lose all sense of time. The stars wheel overhead, cold and indifferent pinpricks, their perfect, silent clockwork a stark contrast to your smoky, labor-intensive vigil. You are fighting a war against the void, and the only weapon you have is this fire. When the first hint of gray finally bleeds into the eastern horizon, the relief is so physical it feels like a weight lifting from your chest. The dawn doesn't mean rest. It means the fire can be banked, allowed to smolder down to embers, and the next shift of labor, cleaning out the night's ashes, inspecting the grate for heat damage, restocking the lamp room, begins. But for a single, precious moment, as you watch the sun reclaim the sea, you feel a connection to every weary soul who has ever stood in this spot, feeding the light, pushing back the dark. It's a fellowship of exhaustion, and you have just been initiated. With the dawn fire banked and the lamp room's acrid smoke slowly dissipating into the damp morning air, a different kind of ship begins. Your eyes, gritty and raw from a night of staring into flames, now turn outward. The sea, which was a featureless, menacing blackness just hours ago, reveals itself in 1,000 shades of gray and green. At first, it's just a vast, empty plain, a sheet of wrinkled lead under a low sky. But as the light strengthens, you start to see it not as a single entity, but as a living, breathing text, and you have no choice but to learn how to read it. This isn't a skill they teach you before sending you out here. It's a language you absorb through your pores, a slow, osmotic education in survival. You begin by watching the waves, not just their size, but their shape and rhythm. Those long, rolling swells that march in from the open ocean, that's the sea's deep, steady breath, usually a sign of settled weather, or at least weather that has settled into a predictable pattern of wind and water. But when those swells shorten, becoming steeper, choppier, like a pan starting to boil, you know something is stirring out there beyond the curve of the world. The wind is changing. You learn the colors, too. The water directly around Serpent's Tooth is often a milky, churned-up green, thanks to the fierce currents churning the pale seabed. But farther out, the color deepens to profound, solid blue-gray on clear days, a color that speaks of cold, deep water. And when that deep blue begins to bleach to a sickly pale gray-green, like tarnished silver, it's one of the sea's most reliable warnings. A storm is brewing. You find yourself unconsciously noting these changes, your internal weather vane turning with the wind. The mainstream historical factor relying on is the same accumulated, practical knowledge that allowed Viking navigators to read wave patterns and bird flight paths to cross open oceans, a science of observation passed down not in books, but in the shared experience of those who lived on the water. Your library is the horizon, and every day is a new chapter. Then there are the ships. At first, they are just specks, tantalizing hints of the world you've left behind. But soon, you start to recognize them by the set of their sails and the shape of their hulls. The slow, tubby cogs, their single square sail bulging like a full belly, are the workhorses of the coastal trade, laden with wool, salt, or timber. They give Serpent's Tooth a wide, respectful berth, their captains knowing the reputation of your rocks. The sleeker, long-distance Nars, heading for more adventurous ports, might cut a little closer, their captains perhaps more confident or more desperate. You even see the occasional fishing boat, though they rarely venture this far out. You start to feel a strange, proprietary connection to these distant vessels. Your light is for them. The long, lonely hours of fire tending find their meaning in the safe passage of that tiny, distant square canvas. You find yourself holding your breath when one sails too close to a known, submerged ridge you can just make out by the way the water breaks over it, exhaling only when it clears a danger. Historians still argue whether lighthouse keepers felt a sense of pride in their work or viewed it as a purely transactional duty, a sentence to be served. As you watch a cog safely navigate the Eastern Channel, a route you now know is only possible with your beacon as a reference point, you feel the answer is probably both a tangled knot of resentment and quiet, unwitnessed pride. A quirky, fringe tidbit you've adopted from a previous keeper's journal is a belief in sea smoke. Not the common fog, but specific, low-lying haze that was said to carry the voices of drowned sailors. You don't hear voices, not exactly, but on still mornings when a peculiar mist clings to the water's surface, the sea does seem to play tricks on sound. The creak of a distant ship's timbers, the shout of a sailor, these sounds can travel, distorted and ghostly, across the flat water. It's easy to see how the legend began, how a lonely mind could populate that blank canvas with phantoms. You don't believe in the ghosts, but you've come to respect the mist, for it always presages a dead calm, a strange, oppressive stillness that is often a prelude to a truly violent storm. So you watch and you listen and you learn. The sea is no longer just a threat or a barrier. It is a complex, moody neighbor, and your survival, and the survival of those distant specks on the water, depends on your ability to understand its every whim and whisper. The dead calms are the worst. The storms are a battle of violent, screaming conflict that at least makes you feel alive. But the calms are a slow, suffocating weight. The sea becomes a sheet of polished lead, unervingly still, reflecting a flat, gray sky so perfectly that the horizon vanishes, and you feel adrift in a featureless sphere, the tower itself seemingly unmoored from reality. The silence is absolute, a physical pressure on your eardrums. In this void, the loneliness you've held at bay with relentless work finally finds you. It seeps through the stone walls and settles in your bones. This is when your mind, deprived of external stimulus, turns inward, and the interior landscape becomes far more treacherous than the sea outside. You find yourself talking aloud just to hear a human voice, even if it's only your own, gone rough with disuse. You recount memories, stories from your old life, but they begin to feel thin and fictional, like tales about a stranger. Did that bustling town with its shouting merchants and laughing children ever really exist? Or was it all just a dream you had before you were born into the stone cylinder? You fight back with routine, the only weapon you have. The maintenance tasks become elaborate, almost ceremonial. You don't just polish the bronze reflectors. You polish them twice, then 3 times, until your weary reflection stares back from a surface of impossible, mirror-like perfection. You reorganize the fuel store not by type, but by how dry it feels, then by how well you think it will burn, then alphabetically by the name of the tree it came from, a system that makes no sense to anyone but you and that you will inevitably forget by tomorrow. You count the steps of the spiral staircase. There are 87. You count the stones in a single course of the lamp room wall. There are 42. This is the arithmetic of sanity, a desperate attempt to impose order on the formless silence. The mainstream historical fact you're embodying is a universal human response to extreme isolation, a phenomenon observed in hermits, prisoners, and explorers alike. The mind, when stripped of society, will either fracture or find new, often bizarre, ways to structure itself. Your little rituals are your anchor. A quirky, fringe tidbit you fully embrace during these times is a previous keeper's wall of faces. On a section of damp stone in the living quarters, he had scratched dozens of tiny, crude faces with nail, smiling, frowning, scowling, sleeping. You thought it was the work of a madman. Now you understand. It's a community. You've added your own, a gallery of the people you remember, their features blurred by time and a constant, dull ache of absence. There's a grizzled sailor who brought you here, the innkeeper from your village will laugh like grinding stones, A girl you once knew whose face you can barely picture anymore. You hold one-sided conversations with them. You ask their opinion on the weather. You tell them about the strange dream you had. It's not madness, it's social survival. Historians still argue whether the keepers of these remote posts were chosen for their mental fortitude or were simply the most expendable members of society, men whose fraying minds wouldn't be missed. As you explain to a scratch face named Old Tom why you decided to save the driest oak logs for a potential storm next week, you feel the distinction is meaningless. You are who you need to be to get through the day. And then there are the moments of unexpected, profound peace. They come without warning, usually in the late afternoon of a calm day. You finish your invented tasks, and for a lack of anything else to do, you simply sit in an archway of the lamp room, your legs dangling over the dizzying drop to the rocks below. The silence stops being oppressive and becomes a blanket. The featureless gray world becomes a canvas for your thoughts. The constant, low-grade anxiety about fuel, about storms, about survival, simply evaporates. In the world you left, you were never truly alone. There was always someone to judge, to compete with, to fear. Here, there is only you, the rock, and the sea. The ego, that noisy, demanding thing, begins to quieten. You are not important. Your worries are not important. You are a function, a caretaker. And in that humbling realization, there is a strange, deep freedom. The solitude, which moments before was a prison, becomes a sanctuary. You breathe in the cold, clean air, and for a little while, you are not lonely. You are just part of the rock, part of the sky, a silent witness to the turning of a world. It's a feeling you know you could never explain to anyone on the mainland. It's the secret treasure buried deep inside the hardship, and it's yours alone. The illusion of solitude is shattered, so abruptly it feels like a physical blow. It starts as a speck on the horizon, but it doesn't move with the lazy drift of a merchant cog. It moves with purpose, directly toward Serpent's Tooth. Your heart, so accustomed to its slow, solitary rhythm, begins to hammer against your ribs. As the vessel draws nearer, you recognize the squat, sturdy shape of a supply boat, the same kind that deposited you here a lifetime ago. A whirlwind of conflicting emotions tears through you, a desperate, childlike hope for news, for a human face, for the sound of another voice, immediately followed by a surge of resentful territoriality. This is your island. This is your silence. Who are they to invade it? The familiar routines of the morning are forgotten as you track the boat's progress, your polishing rag hanging forgotten in your hand. By the time it maneuvers alongside the jetty, the anticipation is a live wire under your skin. You clatter down the stairs, your footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the tower, and emerge into the daylight, just as two men are securing the mooring lines. They are not the grizzled, silent types from your arrival. These are younger, their faces still holding the softness of the mainland. They haul crates and barrels onto the slick stones, their movements efficient, their conversation a casual, overlapping chatter about people and places you don't know. The sound of it is alien, almost offensive to your ears. The one in charge, a man with a red beard and a missing front tooth, grunts a greeting and shoves a wax-sealed leather packet into your hands. "Orders and letters," he says, his voice strangely loud. "And your victuals. Got a new type of hardtack. They say lasts longer. Tastes like plaster, but it lasts." He laughs, a short, barking sound that seems to profane the quiet. You help them carry the supplies into the storage room, your muscles protesting the unfamiliar collaboration. The men talk the entire time, filling the stone chamber with noisy, meaningless air. They speak of a quarrel between two merchants, a bad harvest up north, the price of wool. It's all gossip, the fleeting concerns of a world that now feels trivial and distant. Yet, you find yourself hanging on every word, your mind desperately trying to stitch these fragments into a tapestry that makes sense. You learn that the king is raising taxes again, that a fever swept through a port city to the south, that the fishing has been poor. This is the mainstream historical fact of your connection to the wider world. The lifeline of information and goods that sustain these remote outposts, a trickle of civilization that kept you from reverting completely to a feral state. The crates contain not just food, but nails, a new whetstone, a roll of coarse cloth, and, most precious of all, a small pouch of dried apples. The scent of them is an overwhelming sensory bomb, a direct line to orchards and sunlight you'd almost forgotten. A quirky, fringe tidbit from the previous keeper's notes warned to beware the news from the world, for it is a poison that sours the peace. You understand now. As the men prepare to leave one of them, the quieter one lingers for a moment. He looks at you not with pity, but with a kind of wary curiosity, as if you are a strange animal in a cage. Heard the last keeper when a bit soft in the head. He says, his voice low, started leaving offerings to the rocks. You holding up all right out here? The question is jarring. It forces you to look at yourself from the outside, and the image is unsettling. The man with the scratched faces on the wall. The one who talks to the fire. You just nod, a tight, jerky motion, and mutter something about the weather. He seems satisfied, claps you on the shoulder, a touch that feels like a brand, and heads back to the boat. Historians still argue whether these supply visits were a welcome respite or a traumatic disruption to the keeper's carefully constructed mental equilibrium. As you watch the boat shrink into the distance, the silence rushing back in to fill the space their voices occupied, you know the answer is both. The peace you had cultivated feels fractured, the solitude now feeling less like a choice and more like a sentence. The taste of the apple is already fading, leaving only a dull, familiar ache. The sea's warning, that pale, sickly gray-green hue you noted days ago, was not an empty threat. The calm was a lie, a held breath. Now, the sea is exhaling its fury. It begins not with sudden crash, but with a deepening, resonant hum in the air, a vibration you feel in your teeth more than hear. The wind, which had been a constant companion, sharpens its tone from a whistle to a shriek. The first true sign is the foam. It doesn't just crest on the waves. The wind tears it off in great, flying sheets that streak horizontally across the sky, like the sea itself is being flayed. You feel it now, a primal, gut-level understanding that transcends the learned signs. This is not a squall. This is the real thing. A North Sea gale, the kind of storm that sinks fleets and reshapes coastlines. And you and your tower of stone are directly in its path. The preparation is a frantic, silent ballet against a rising din. You batten down everything that can be battened. The heavy oak shutters on the lamp room arches, which you almost never use, are slammed shut and secured with thick iron bars. They groan and shudder as if trying to escape their fastenings. You haul extra fuel up the stairs, a dangerous, panting effort as the tower begins to sway. A subtle, nauseating motion you've never felt before. It's not the stone moving. You tell yourself, it's the rock beneath it, the very foundation of the world trembling. The sound is the worst of it. It's a roaring, mindless chaos. The wind is no longer a shriek, but a continuous, deafening explosion. Waves, now the size of small hills, detonate against the base of the island, and the spray hits the top of the tower, over 100 feet up, not as mist, but as a solid, stinging slap of salt water. The world has been reduced to this maelstrom of gray water, white foam, and screaming wind. Lighting the beacon is an act of war. Inside the shuttered lamp room, it's a dark, howling cave. The wind finds every crack and seam, whistling through with the force of a blade. You have to build a fire in a corner, using your body as a shield, your clothes already soaked from the spray that forced its way in during your last trip upstairs. The tinder is damp. Your hands are shaking, and the flint seems to throw only useless, dying sparks. Panic, cold and sharp, claws at your throat. If the light fails tonight, any ship caught in this, any vessel that has misjudged its position, is doomed. They will be driven onto the rocks you call home, and you will be the last thing they never see. The responsibility is an anvil on your chest. Finally, a spark catches. You nurse the flame with a frantic, tender desperation, feeding it the driest, most oil-rich rushes, blowing on it until you're lightheaded. The fire sputters, fights for its own life, and then gloriously takes hold. The mainstream historical fact you are defending with your life is a foundational principle of all lighthouse keeping. Pharos, the original wonder. The light must be kept burning, regardless of cost. In this moment, you are no different from the keepers of Alexandria, battling Mediterranean storms to guide Roman grain ships. The fire is your legion, your command. But the storm is a clever, brutal enemy. A particularly violent gust slams into the tower, and a fine jet of spray somehow forces its way through a shuttered arch, hitting the fire directly. The flame hisses violently, clouds of thick, white smoke billowing up, choking you, threatening to snuff it out completely. You throw yourself forward, adding more fuel, shielding the core of the embers with your own body, your eyebrows singeing from the heat. Historians still argue whether the psychological profile of a successful keeper leaned more toward courage or sheer dog stubbornness. As you cough, blinded by smoke, your ears ringing from the storm's fury, stubbornness feels like the truer word. You are simply too obstinate to let this fire die. The night that follows is an eternity in hell. The storm does not rage in waves. It is one continuous, sustained peak of violence. The tower trembles unceasingly. You feed the fire, the heat a welcome counterpoint to the damp, penetrating cold. You can feel the thunder of the waves of the stone floor, a deep, percussive thump that resonates in your bones. There is no thought, only action. Fuel, tend, clear ash, repeat. You are a machine, a component of the lighthouse itself. You are the fuel that keeps the light alive. There is no world beyond this room, this fire, this storm. You lose all sense of time, existing only in the interval between one crashing wave and the next. It is the purest, most terrifying, and most profoundly alive you have ever felt. You are not a man in a tower. You are the light, and you are at war with the dark. And you are winning. The storm does not end. It exhausts itself. The change is gradual, a slow retreat of the enemy. The shrieking wind drops to a roar, then a howl, then finally back to its familiar, sullen whistle. The constant, bone-deep vibration of the tower ceases, leaving an eerie stillness in its wake that feels, for a long time, like a new kind of noise. The thunder of the waves recedes from a continuous assault to a rhythmic, almost gentle crash. You don't notice it at first. Hunched over the fire, your body operating on a rhythm of pure instinct. It's only when you realize you haven't had to shield the flames from a rogue gust for several minutes that you understand the battle is over. The fire, now unchallenged, burns with a steady, confident glow, as if it knows it has prevailed. The ache in your muscles, held at bay by adrenaline, now rushes in a deep, total body weariness that makes your very bones feel heavy. You are caked in a mixture of soot, dried salt, and sweat, a gritty second skin that is the badge of your survival. With a caution that feels ceremonial, you unbar one of the heavy shutters and push it open. The world you see is new, scoured clean and raw. The air is crystal clear, sharp and cold, and the sky is a hard, brilliant blue, the kind that only appears after great cleansing. The sea is still a churned-up frenzy of whitecaps, but the malevolent, towering waves have been replaced by energetic, chaotic swells. Sunlight glints off the water, 1,000 blinding diamonds scattered across the surface. The rocks below are slick and dark, draped with strange gifts from the deep. Long strands of kelp, pieces of splinter wood that might be from a fishing boat or a broken crate, and the pale, delicate forms of jellyfish stranded in tidal pools. You take a deep, shuddering breath, filling your lungs with the clean, post-storm air. It's over. The days that follow are a time of assessment and repair. The storm has left its signature everywhere. A section of the stone jetty has been undermined, great blocks tossed aside like a child's toys. The shutters are pitted from the relentless salt spray. But the tower stands. It always stands. Your existence settles back into its routines, but the texture of it has changed. The memory of the storm is a lens, sharpening your perception of everything. The quiet is no longer just an absence of sound, but a hard-won peace. The sight of a distant ship, its sail a tiny, brave square against a vastness, doesn't just evoke a proprietary feeling. It evokes a fierce, protective pride. You kept the light burning. You were the fixed point in the chaos. Those sailors, whoever they are, will never know your name, will never pour you a drink in gratitude. But you played your part. Their safe passage is your legacy, written not on parchment, but on the water itself. Historians still argue whether the service of a lighthouse keeper was a net benefit to their personal character, forging resilience and purpose, or whether it simply wore them down, leaving them hollowed out and strange. As you sit in your archway, watching the sunset paint a calm sea in fiery colors, you feel the answer is, like the sea itself, too complex for a simple conclusion. It has worn you down, yes. You are thinner, harder, more silent. The man who arrived on a supply boat feels like a boy, naive and soft. But it has also forged something in you, a core of stillness that the storm could not break. A quirky, fringe tidbit you now cherish is the old belief that a keeper who served his full term without a major shipwreck would have his name whispered by the waves for all eternity. You don't believe in the literal truth of it, but the poetry of it feels right. Your legacy isn't in records or ledgers. It's in the safe passages, the near misses that never happened, the silent gratitude of 1,000 unknown men. The mainland, with its taxes and fevers and quarrels, feels less like home and more like a faded dream. This rock, this tower, this endless, demanding sea, this is what is real. Your tenure is almost up. The end of your service a distant point on the horizon, much like the ships you guide. And for the first time, the thought of leaving brings not excitement, but a quiet, profound sense of loss. The wind, your constant companion, has finally softened to a whisper, a gentle hush that seems to suit the very stones around you. The frantic energy of the storm, the gnawing anxiety of isolation, the sheer physical grind of the daily duties, all of it is receding now, like a tide pulling slowly away from the shore, leaving behind a smooth, quiet expanse of peace. You've learned the language of this place, not just the warning signs of the sea and the sky, but the deeper, more subtle dialect of solitude, the one that speaks in the spaces between heartbeats. The fire, which once was a temperamental beast to be wrestled, now feels like an old friend. Its warm, rhythmic glow of silent conversation you share through the long nights. You can feel the weight of all the keepers who came before you, a silent lineage of watchers, their presence woven into the fabric of the tower, their endurance now a part of your own. And you understand, with a clarity that needs no words, that you will soon become part of that fabric too, a memory in the stone, a story the waves might one day tell. There is no fear in this, only a deep, abiding calm. The light is steady. The sea is quiet. Your watch is almost over. So you close your eyes just for a moment and let the sound of the ocean, that ancient, endless lullaby, carry you away from the rock, away from the tower, into the soft, welcoming, dark, sweet dreams.